Hello there. 1 week ago, it was Halloween 2019, and I was at Reboot Develop Red, a game development conference in Banff, Canada. It was a blast. It was a lot of fun. There was a lot of good talks there. Unfortunately, they did not record all of the talks, so I thought I would recreate my beautiful talk here. Just share out the knowledge a little bit more. It's not my best talk in the world or anything, but I think there's some good points in here that are easier to iterate in person than they are through a miles-long blog post. Maybe I'll do that someday too. One note before I get to the slide. As you'll see why later in this talk, this video has no editing and is done in one take. So even though I restarted recording 6 or 7 times now, I'm getting sick of it. So if I make any mistakes, you're going to be along with the ride for me. So let's do this. Let's do this for real this time. Number 1. All right, this is my talk. Welcome. Thanks for coming and sitting in my talk in the mountains in the Great White North. Prototyping at lightning speed when rapid prototyping is lame and slow. I'm Andy. Throw my email address up early in case you want to write me questions through email while I'm giving the talk. Please feel free. I'll show you again at the end of the talk. Now I'm going to click on the right window so I can advance the slides. How Quick Code Got Me Married and How You Can Marry Me Too. That was the alternate title for this talk, but I'll get to that later. Hi, I'm Andy Moore. This is me dancing in virtual reality in the game Fantastic Contraption. That's a game that my studio, Radial Games, and our partner studio, Northway Games, made for the launch of commercial VR back in 2016. It's probably what I'm most well known for. I did found Radial Games 10 years ago, though, and worked at the Museum of Other Realities, a kick-ass VR experience for a hot minute, and nowadays I'm working at Absurd Joy. Normally I go into more detail about my depth, like what I've made, all that kind of stuff, but I'm going to be pulling a lot of examples from my past into this talk, so you'll get the full experience as we go. Joining me in this talk is Mr. Maple. He's kind enough to provide royalty-free images for me, and yeah. In this presentation, I'm going to be talking about extremes in production. Now, honestly, I've been a programmer my whole life. I love code. I think of most things through the lens of code, and this talk is going to be talking about fast, extreme, lightning speed development from a code lens. But everything I'm about to say in this talk could be translated to other realms as well. Art, modeling, design, meetings in general. I hope everyone can have a little bit of a takeaway from it. But yeah. So what do I mean by extremes, though? Our game industry typically thinks on this timeline of 4-year development cycles. If someone walks up to you and says, hey, I've been working at a AAA studio, we've been working on a game for 3 years, it's not out yet, no one blinks, that's fine, these are just normal times. Somewhere on this line, totally normal. Rapid development is, if we zoom in on this little red square here, rapid development is kind of on this 3-month scale. Somewhere on this timeline is the normal concept of being iterative or pivoting or scheduling a meeting. Sometimes takes 3 months in this industry. So this is kind of the normal timeline when people talk about quick development. Some people ship a game in 3 months. I've shipped a game in 3 months, and yeah, people call that rapid. So that's fine. This is kind of what the industry considers extremes, but this talk is actually talking about this red square here. So I'm going to be talking about 1 week as the maximum. I'm going to be talking about 48-second game jams. I'm going to be talking about 48-hour game jams. I'm going to be talking about 48... Wait, I just said 48. 24. I've made games in like under a minute, in 1 minute. I've made a lot of games in 5, 10, 15 minutes. I've made games to prove a point in an hour. I've prepared games for a meeting that's coming up later in the day. I have made a lot of 48-hour, 24-hour game jams, you know, all that stuff. Like, that's kind of what I'm talking about. Lightning fast things. Things not just about, shipping a game from start to finish. I'm talking prototyping, getting an idea out there, just seeing how a control style feels. Though I did take it to an extreme, and did ship some of those things to the public, but I'll get to that later. In this talk, I'm going to be covering 8 different topics that are kind of touching on lightning fast prototyping in different ways. It's hard to find a narrative thread for lightning quick prototyping. It's something that touches everything equally, so there's not a straight path through it, so I'm going to kind of bounce around a little bit. I'm going to be trying to anchor this whole talk around the way that I've done it through my life. It may come off as bragging, I hope not, but it's the only thing I can kind of hang the whole narrative thread off of. So yeah, let's get started with number 1 there. Why lightning? So there are some benefits to doing lightning quick prototyping, and the biggest benefit is no, I'm just kidding. It's not actually a giant pile of cash. Some people think at first blush it might be easy to make money with lightning quick prototyping. If you make a game in 5 minutes and you sell 1 copy of that game, that might be the biggest hourly wage you've ever made in the game industry. That may be true, but sustaining that is very difficult. You can't make a game a minute all day, every day, all year. You'll just burn out. So you can't sustain income, though it is possible to make money on quick things, which is how my career started. So yeah, here's some real benefits though. I've gained a lot of benefits in my personal life. There's also a lot of benefits corporately or for your product, for your team. I'll be covering all of these in different ways. Speaking opportunities is one of the personal benefits I've gotten. But I'm going to start off with the last item there, which is finding the essence. Finding the essence, which more commonly phrased in our industry is finding the fun, or pivoting, or iterating, or when you make a bunch of early game concepts and that idea of you have to be able to kill your babies, these are all different ways of just finding the essence of your product. Lightning fast prototyping is the fastest at finding the essence of your product. There is a lot of things you can do way faster just to see if something works. If you make an example or a prototype saying, hey, look, like jumping this high feels good. I mean, you can make that in 2 minutes. It doesn't take you 3 weeks of architecting and engineering. So finding the essence of something is very, very important. The faster you find the essence, the faster you can pivot, the faster you can iterate, the faster the art can get started, all that stuff. There are talks on how important it is to finding the essence to your product as fast as possible. Lightning fast prototyping is as fast as possible. So they kind of go naturally well together. Why lightning? Rapid development, I think, is just too slow. Oftentimes, scrums are set up on teams, or any kind of rapid prototyping turnaround time are framed or hung around this 2-week concept. If it takes you 2 weeks just to get one idea done, that's bad. Now, a good scrum master might tell you, or good team lead might tell you, hey, in this 2 weeks, let's make 20 different examples, and then at the end of 2 weeks, let's review them all. That's much better, but by framing it around a 2-week dev cycle, people just kind of naturally gravitate to doing one thing in 2 weeks, or architecting that one thing very, very well in that 2 weeks. And there's a good reason for that. We've been conditioned to having long deadlines. In academia, we have the semester system. Homework's due over the weekend, or in a week's time. Meetings often take, I've done consulting for very fast prototyping, and some companies, it takes them 2 months to schedule an appointment to bring me in, and then it takes 2 weeks to find a slot in everyone's calendar, and then I'm there to talk about how to make things in 1 hour. I mean, corporate life is not compatible with thinking about short-term deadlines. Heck, even our calendar is on a 30-day cycle. We're kind of predisposed to everything taking a long time. So when you start thinking about making things really quickly, it almost feels impossible. It feels hard to think about. Our brains are not reset to that as a fundamental baseline. So it requires effort. It requires effort to think this way. And if someone's not expecting to think this way, if you just spring rapid or lightning fast development on someone at your team, their instinct is going to be to push back and dig in their heels. So it's going to be hard. Why lightning? Our industry loves complexity, loves it. Every single time you write code, it has to be perfectly documented, ultimately optimized, and reusable from now until the end of time. That's kind of the default, right? There's not enough attention given to actual skill development or the skill of developing things quickly. Almost everything in our industry is assumed that if you don't write good code, then it is not worth writing. One of the things I've learned by doing things lightning quick is you make a lot of shortcuts. Like an example I'll use later on, so I shouldn't use it now, but it's the only one on the top of my head is if you have a for loop, but it's taking you too long to write the for loop properly, just copy and paste 10 times instead of looping 10 times, right? That's bad. You don't want to do that. It's not good code reuse, blah, blah, blah. But lightning fast stuff is often meant to be tissue-based development. You're supposed to use it and throw it away. How many of you out there have written code that you've promised you'd throw away and rewrite later, but you don't? You just kind of clean it up and keep going, right? Lightning fast prototyping kind of enforces that, and it teaches you a different set of skills. I have a small library of code now that is very bad and not performant, but it gets things done very quickly. So loving complexity is good for shipped products. Making something reusable is good for shipped products. It's not necessarily a skill that you can develop that makes you faster. All of those things, reuse and beautiful code and blah, 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 they're actually slower in the moment. It makes your project faster long term, but for finding the essence, it's a little bit slower. Okay, topic number 2. Lightning produces static. So I'm not saying this is a panacea. I'm not saying everyone should make everything lightning fast. I just want to clarify really quick. Though I have shipped some games in a week or faster, I'm not saying anyone should do this. There's some big critical fails that can happen if you do. One of those critical fails is pure messaging. Now, I know a lot of AAA developers might be listening in on this, and if you are, the concept of getting approval to ship something in 1 week is just completely bonkers. It's never going to happen. Image and messaging are very important in our industry, and if you ship a whole bunch of small things, you might generate your studio might take on a flavor or a reputation for making junk. So you don't want that. That's bad, right? So as 2 examples, one, this is something someone actually said to my face. I was talking to a publisher and I was proud at how fast I made the thing. And they said, nobody gives a shit about how long it took to make. That's very true. In fact, how quickly you made it might be a red flag if you don't frame it correctly. The way I frame it nowadays, this is an actual mistake that I made because I didn't communicate the point of lightning fast development. I should have said, hey, this only took me a week. Imagine what I can do in a year. Instead, I just kind of stopped after that first sentence, right? This only took me a week. Yeah. Right. That's bad. That's a bad move. Don't do that. The public doesn't care. Publishers don't care. In fact, it might hurt more than it helps. The only minor benefit might be if you frame it correctly, it might be a really good news story or a blog post or something, but public facing, I think this knowledge is dangerous in the wrong hands. And that's largely because I'll get to why the society doesn't approve of fast things in a hot second here. But talking to other developers, like I am now, sometimes produces this response. Someone else actually told me this to my face, and that hurt a lot. And is because, again, I framed it incorrectly. Someone thought what I was saying is, someone thought I was just taking a big crap on the whole concept of artistic intent and a creative endeavor. That pure art form of making games. I've fucked that up by making it so quickly. I kind of boiled everything down to pure mechanics, no imagination, and no art, and blah, 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 blah. That's not my point. I'm not trying to strip out, the humanity and the art from games. So when you're talking to other developers or developers on your team, you might get that kind of pushback, kind of the shitting on the creative ideal. We have to make sure we're really clear on the messaging here. All right, caveats done. Let's talk about topic number 3, using time constraints. Time constraints, this may feel obvious. How do you make things quickly? You make it quickly, right? I'm not I'm very aware of the I forget the word. When something is guaranteed true, you know that word. That sciencey fuck. Okay. There's a word that means something's guaranteed true, and I've forgotten it, and I'm not going to edit it into the video, so you're screwed. I'm not trying to just state the obvious here. I'm trying to lead into bottling lightning feels impossible. Like making something super lightning fast feels fundamentally impossible. And if you even take some developers, I've done this. I helped teach a computer science or game development course, and one of the activities that we did was a 48-hour game jam with all the students. It was required mandatory attendance. It was part of the class. And a lot of those students said, like, they just sat down in their chair in a slump and just said, oh, this is impossible. Like, this is clearly a set of skills that I don't have. I've also seen teams say this. I've seen like AAA teams that are used to huge development cycles, just their mind is blown that you can even make something, that you can even open an IDE in under 48 hours. So it can feel impossible for a lot of the reasons I said earlier. I'm going to talk a little bit about some forms of time constraints that can actually help your productivity, not just for code, but for all sorts of things. One of them is upfront time boxing or commitment. So setting up something up front, like if you block out an area of time, let's say you block out 4 hours, you have to make sure that everyone that's working on this with you, or if it's just yourself, lay it out for yourself as well. Lay out very clear expectations. Say, hour 1, I'm just going to be on pen and paper. I'm going to be figuring out exactly what I'm going to be making. Hour 2, I'm going to be, doing the first, code setup, basic code setup. Hour 3, I'm going to be actually iterating on finding the fun. And hour 4, I'm going to be polishing it for presentation tomorrow. Having those clear markings of time are a great way to, they're a great forcing function to make you commit to making it happen. None of this hand waving, there's a really big tendency to just kind of think to yourself, hour 1, I'm going to think about it. And hour 2, I'll pull out a pen. And hour 3, I'm going to go for lunch. And hour 4, I'll start writing it. And then I can take another 4 hours because no one's going to mind if I take another extra time. That's not commitment, obviously. It's kind of cheating. So yeah, being upfront about the commitment and boxing off the time in a very clear, concise way. Actually write it down, start a timer, do all those things. It really, really helps. What's an example of something that does this really well? Game jams. Game jams do this really, really well. There's kind of a societal expectation that when you show up to a game jam, you have nothing. When you leave a game jam, it's published to the public. Clear commitment, tons of previous examples. There's a lot of game jams out there, like Global Game Jam. They have a website with thousands and thousands of games published to it that have all been done with this as a core concept. Now, people can leave a game jam and work on a game a little bit longer. Sure. I'm not saying that you can't continue working on something. I'm not saying you shouldn't continue iterating. But jam games are a really good example of that. Getting away from actual product development, though, I couldn't think of a name. Please don't use Lightning Generator. Here's a work style that I stumbled across. This is thanks to Matthew Wegner. He turned me on to this. It's a flavor of Pomodoro. This is how I work day to day, not necessarily on a lightning fast prototype or a full project, but this is how I just do my work every single day, and it helps reinforce that time commitment and focus. I think this slide alone could be a good talk. This is worth preaching right here. This is very important. Probably the most important slide in this whole talk. All right, here's how it works. You sit down for 45 minutes. You turn off all your distractions. Pure code or pure work, whatever you're working on. At the end of the 45 minutes, you round out the hour by standing up, stretching, communicating with your team, opening Slack, checking your email, checking Facebook, relaxing, and reflecting on the work you just did, and if you want to do another cycle next hour. I actually set myself up a variety of customized playlists. So in Spotify, I have some playlists that are exactly 45 minutes long. So I don't actually have the oppressive countdown timer. I just wait till the music stops and then I stop. So it's pretty nice. If you successfully complete this hour-long cycle, now that means you stop at 45 minutes, you don't work an extra 10 minutes by mistake. And if you don't check your Facebook or check Twitter or respond to your Slack bouncing in your system tray, if you successfully do the 45 minutes distraction-free, then you count that as a success. And that success means the way I do it is I just have like effectively a wall calendar, and you just put a check mark on the day. And you can kind of look back at the month and see how productive you've been. Now, the interesting thing is that with this system, I've been writing code my whole life, and I didn't really know how much code I could get done, and I didn't know how productive I was. And a solid 45-minute cycle like that lets me kind of wrap it up and measure it as one unit. And now after doing this for years, I have an innate sense of exactly what I can do in 45 minutes. And that's lightning quick, dirty trash tissue code or production, properly documented code, or anything in between. I kind of know, I have this feeling for how long it's going to take me to do anything. And this also works for, if your job is checking email, sure, do 45 minutes of distraction-free checking email. And the best thing about this is there's very rarely an emergency that can't wait 15 minutes. So if someone's like pinging you nonstop, it doesn't really matter if you wait until the end of the 45 minutes to start talking to them for the extra 15. Now, code is very brainy work. A lot of work, like just doing pure art or pure problem solving, is difficult and taxing on the brain. So measuring how many of these cycles I can do per day is a fun little statistics experiment. Lets you learn a little bit about yourself and what you can accomplish. When I first started, I couldn't do any. I kept getting distracted. So I obviously didn't have the skills to focus. But by doing this, it helped teach me focus. And my code got faster and better and more clear and more solid for it. I got distracted less and less by social media for it, so that was great. But I also found that in let's say an 8-hour workday, I averaged 3.5 of these cycles a day. That's it, just 3.5. The other half of the time, I'm being distracted. I'm checking my email. I'm doing the other work that isn't code. So now I know I've got 3-4 hours of code in me per day, and that's it. So now I know long-term planning. Some days I'm having a bad day. I can only do one. And for game jams, I can do 6 to 8, but then I can't do anything the next day, right? I can kind of double up on one day and then take a break the next day. So I know this about myself. How many people on your team, or can you gauge accurately how much work you can do in a day? This system really works, really helps. I really recommend it. Okay, enough on this. Another way to use time constraints. Daily warm-ups. Now, this one is an interesting one because artists do daily warm-ups all the time. And the example I like to use is imagine there's a marble carver. I'm sure they have an official name. Someone that chisels faces into statues or makes statues. If they wake up in the morning and they grab a slice of toilet paper and with a crayon they do a doodle on it, they post that to Twitter. No one looks at that piece of toilet paper and says, wow, their work's really gone downhill. No, through context, people know that that is socially acceptable, one, and two, it'll probably get more retweets than their actual marble carvings. Am I right? The terrible shame of social media. That social acceptability of a doodle is long established for art. But for other tasks like code, or I think even worse, design, people shit on that. If it appears like a doodle, people assume that this is what you think is the new quality bar. This is why AAA corporations will often bring in consultants just to teach them that that brainstorming, that throwing out random ideas is an okay thing to do, right? We need experts to tell us that it's okay to say a dumb idea out loud. But programmers, like, if you make a career out of posting to Twitter your dumb 5-minute warm-ups every morning, people are going to think you're a shitty programmer and you can't do anything but 5-minute prototypes. Right? That sucks. I want that to change. I want us as society to change that mindset. I want my daily warm-ups to become a socially acceptable thing. I want to post to Twitter all my little experiments. But I don't, because I know what it means. I know what it says. Here's an image of a little warm-up thing I made called Sad Train. It took me about half an hour. It was my first foray at 3D modeling using Unity cubes. Beautiful. Look, how could you not be weeping at the sight of Sad Train? I made a really quick, dumb little game. I even composed an original song for it, so now I've got some hit music. I think daily warm-ups can be delightful, and I think programmers can open an IDE or a tool like Unity or Unreal, and you just challenge yourself to make something for 5 minutes every morning. And even if you don't publish it publicly, at least file it away in a folder somewhere. Keep your little library of fun little experiments. It's just a way to practice every morning to doing things quickly, and it'll help you gauge how long it takes to even do the simplest of tasks. Some people can't even set up a Unity work environment in 5 minutes or less. I know how to now. That's a skill I've learned. It's helped me out in other ways in life, but I think more people should be doing daily warm-ups. Funnily enough, the biggest pushback I get on the concept of code daily warm-ups is it takes too much time. Think about that. It's dumb. It's dumb. 5 minutes every morning. Just do it. Everyone should do it. Just do it. Just do it. I formalized my daily warm-ups into a Twitch code challenge. Now, this is way back when Twitch.tv first started. What I did is I wrote a little bot that would poll the audience for a time and a game. So there's kind of a few choices. This is why I made a game in 48 seconds. It's because the Twitch community challenged me to. And then you can name a game, usually a classic game like Arkanoid or Tetris or something like that. And I try to clone the game in that time span. Now, I can't reach all the way over. Oh, which way is my camera facing? The far image there, the little black and white line, that is Nibbles, or what do you call it, Snake. I tried to clone that in under 5 minutes. I ended up not using Unity or anything for that one. That was an old Flash build. And I screwed up my coordinates, and it kind of canted the whole thing on a 45-degree angle, and I didn't know why, and I didn't have time to debug, obviously. So, it became really hard, because now on this, in Snake, does hitting the left arrow key turn you to the left, or does it go down? Like, it added this interesting flavor of control obfuscation, which is a fun mistake that it created some delight. So that was interesting. On the right-hand side is a little bit longer. I spent an hour making a 2D flight simulator. Boo. I later went on to polish that up and actually release it. But just codifying your examples into an actual extracurricular fun activity, I think really worked. Me taking my daily warm-ups and taking it to Twitch allowed me to build a community and a following. It was really fun having all the Twitch streamers yell at me because I forgot a semicolon, but I didn't have time to read the chat. So there's this interesting dynamic of people cheering me on to write code, which rarely happens. And then everyone in the community gets to play the output. And it's different than posting a daily warm-up to Twitter, because on Twitter, people will look at that and think it's like they don't get the context of all the pain and suffering that went into making it and all the constraints that went into making it. So I think that was interesting. I'm not saying everyone should go make a Twitch channel, but there's different ways you can do it. Talking about just long-term development practices, though, there's this idea of always be shipping. Now, this is often applied to long-term, like post-launch business practices. This is, the idea of you have a product out there in early access or software as a service, and you're just constantly updating it. You're constantly shipping. You're always pushing out new content. I'm talking about taking that same concept and bringing it into pre-launch development. Here's a proposal I have. I'm very serious about this proposal. I think every single person on your team should be committing to your master branch or your main source control every day. Every single day. And the first pushback I get from that is, well, what if I'm working on some code? What if I'm working on rewriting the networking engine and that's going to take me 2 or 3 weeks? That's fine. But in order to push that to master every single day, that means you have to properly cordon off your code, wrap it in an if or a command line parameter or something to make sure that it doesn't break the rest of the game. But everything being in the build every day means that when you're doing your daily playtests, which everyone watching this is doing a daily playtest, I'm sure, because if you're not doing that, you're making a really big mistake. So I'm just going to assume everyone's doing a daily playtest. Now your daily playtest can guaranteed be different every day. You can be testing something new every day. And if something's broken, you can just hide it and hide it behind like a keyboard shortcut or cheat code. And that allows people to test out the thing that you're halfway through building and might give you some feedback on, help you iterate on the idea or help you develop the idea a little bit faster. So I think that's something that everyone should be doing. Practice every day, play every day, push every day, get your ideas out every day. If something takes longer than a day to make, like I love loading up a game and seeing half-done art or a half-done 3D model. It looks interesting. It's neat. Let's do more of that. All right, moving on. Next big topic is kind of the language of I can't. I covered a lot of this at the beginning of the last section, about the pushback that people give you on just starting this process at all. I think you need to be leading by example. You need to, if you have a team, you need to show the team what's possible in a short time span. I think you need to enforce making things quickly at a structural level, at a policy level at your company. For example, if you have a game studio, it should be a rule that everyone at your game studio has to do a 5-minute prototype. Then everyone isn't just staring at that one guy making shit in the corner. You can now have the entire team all pushing stuff all the time. So I think lead by example, set the policy, set the precedent, just start doing it. Things will start falling into place. Someone says, I can't. I say, try using a higher level tool. If the challenge is to make something in 5 minutes, it's hard to open Unreal on a slow computer and set up a basic project in 5 minutes. Extract higher level tools into your workflow. Or inject into your workflow, not extract. Dumb. Okay, so the higher the level the tool, usually the faster it is to get into things. And my example is, I would say Unreal is a more powerful engine than Unity, but Unity gets you more wild and crazy things faster than Unreal does. So Unreal's great at doing FPSs, but it suffers in performance a little bit when it comes down to like compile time and things like that. But you can go more abstracted. I mean, making something in PHP is even faster. Making something in HTML is even faster than that. I mean, typically not games, but so the faster you can develop, the easier this all is. And that usually means a higher level tool, which usually means more abstraction, which means less control, or it's harder to get fine control out of it. So play around with your tool selection. Anytime I come across an Unreal Studio, I ask them if their office owns a single Unity license, and that helps me gauge how fast they're prototyping and iterating. That's not to say that using Unreal is impossible. If someone's dead set on that and learning that, please do. Just make yourself a prototyping project and kind of save that out. And then anytime you want to start a new prototype, you just duplicate the folder. You just open it up and everything's set up and ready to go. Highly recommend that. When you're struggling with making something, if you're thinking, I can't do this in my head, know that code reuse is really slow. Now, I mentioned before, like academia, comp sci degrees, the industry at large, your boss, everyone's telling you that code reuse is key. If this code isn't reusable a million times from here to Sunday, then you're doing a bad job. So our brains have been trained to make sure that all of our code is reusable. And how many times have you as a programmer sat back in your chair and thought, oh, I can make this recursive. And you sit there thinking for like 30 seconds on like how you're going to make this function recursive. That's a waste of time when you're talking about Lightning development. You should be able to do both, right? And if you can't resist that urge to make it right, you need more practice at Lightning prototyping. This is why I said cut and paste 10 times instead of doing a for loop. It sounds dumb, but if it sounds dumb, you're on the wrong mindset. You need to be making things faster, and sometimes the fastest way is just cut and paste. Institutionalized practice, I talked about this up at the top of this section. Now, my friend Alex Schwartz says, I'm the fastest coder in the West. But I think this is actually not true. Sometimes I feel like I'm the fastest coder in the West because I'm the only one competing. I'm sure that's not true. I'm sure there's a lot of people making a ton of shit really quickly. I'm just a very developer-focused developer. I'm often making blog posts and videos like this to help other developers. I don't often make videos and blog posts for the final consumer of my product. So I like to be a bit more of an educator, helping to give back to our industry a little bit. I'm sure there's a lot of people that code faster than me, and they're private about it, and they're not sharing their crap on Twitter like I do. So just make sure that you're doing your part. I'd love to see more people like me being a bit more public about it. I want to not be the fastest coder in the West, publicly facing. Please, someone take the title from me. I don't want it. Okay, collaborative inspiration. Here's Mr. Maple on my lap. This is the encapsulation of the idea that the sooner the draft, the sooner the inspiration. This is the idea that as soon as you get something even half broken, half ideated, half doodled into an actual work environment, you inspire inspiration in everyone else on your team. There's a problem in the industry where someone has an idea in their head, a concept that they really want to get out into the world, or at least to the team, like someone's like, oh, I have this idea for this beautiful skybox or something, right? And they won't let you see it, so they'll cover up the screen until they're done because they don't want you to judge it too early. We need a societal shift on how we feel about this, but I really think that this is a problem, and we need to share more often, more quickly. We need to share our inspiration or share our drafts so that we can help generate inspiration amongst other people. Oftentimes, a half-finished idea leads someone to think it's something that it's not, but that idea, that inspiration you've just generated, may be better than the original concept. And maybe it's not. You can still go on and finish your original vision. I'm not saying don't complete your original vision, but let people look over your shoulder. Put it into the daily playtest builds. Let people run with your half-finished ideas, and you might end up in a better place. I'm going to use an example from my own life for this. This is a game called L'Erax e Zacco. I believe it's an Italian game for DOS 6.1. Going way back there. It's a fun little game. You can... excuse me. It's a fun little game that you can run around and blow up a building in before 9/11. So you collect the fruit, you plant bombs, the building collapses, just like a physics-based puzzle platformer. I hadn't seen anything like this since DOS days, and I said, I want to play this again, and I can't get the emulator to work, so let's build a clone. I made a gray box clone of this game. It was very, very rough. I spent like a day on it. It's just a very basic, you set a landmine at a structural support, and then like a really basic, like just cubey building just falls down. I showed that to a friend at the time, Greg Woolwind, and he's a brilliant artist and graphic designer, and he came up with this. So this is a game that we actually published together called Protonaut. He said, what if, instead of blowing up buildings, what if I make the art style that of Cold War Russian propaganda, and instead of being at normal human scale, what if you're an abstraction of an astronaut diving in under the microscope? So the whole game takes place on like a petri dish or a slide under a microscope. And instead of blowing up buildings, how about we blow up molecular bonds? Now, this is a complete departure. The gameplay is almost identical. You can kind of see in the screenshots on the left there that you can still throw bombs around, you can still blow things up, you can still tear apart molecular bonds and things collapse, and that's the core gameplay loop. My original prototype still works. But this layer of creativity that was built on it might not have happened if I had actually made it look like this, right? If it looked like this, then Greg would have just ran with it and made a city skyline, made some buildings and shit, and it would have been a forgettable game. But he turned it into this, which ended up being this amazing puzzly mechanic, and it was one of our early design successes. Like I really, really like this game that we made together. Now, these things can't happen if you're not putting your work out there a little bit earlier. There's also the concept of happy mistakes. Now, this is kind of the idea that bugs can be good. Fantastic Contraption is full of a whole bunch of little, like, whoops, yay moments. One of them is, it would have been really easy to put a lerp or a clamp in this video. I'll play that again. So that when the cat's head moves back and forth, it's just tracking your hand's position, right? But if we put a lerp or a clamp on it, it would have drifted a lot more slowly, but we're making it really quickly. So if you get your hand close enough to the cat, his head shakes when you scratch his chin because it's trying to track with your hand and we didn't put a lerp on it. Now, the line of code to fix the lerp, which would have gone in if we did like a code review or something, or we're making perfect code, then we wouldn't have gotten this cute little chin scratch moment mechanic, right? So there's an idea that basic engineering can wipe out magic. If you fix a bug before you commit it to the repo, that bug might not cause a cascading butterfly flap effect, chaos theory, and make something wonderful. Oftentimes doing things like, whoops, I accidentally turned off gravity can make whole new game mechanics, right? So try to live with bugs, try to celebrate bugs. Obviously, if it breaks the game, you might need to fix it. But instead of fixing a bug, try just wrapping it in a bool and then make it a keyboard shortcut or something. Then maybe you can use those bugs in the future. Maybe it takes 2 bugs combined to make something magical. There's also this idea that humor's kind of in the unexpected. I think that's the official definition of humor. If you're surprised by an outcome, by a punchline, then that is humor. When players in Fantastic Contraption found out that you could throw the cat, they're often met with delight or horror. But being able to invoke those sensations in someone was as easy as us like forgetting to remove the rigid body from the cat, right? Like, so that's a powerful emotion, and you can easily double down on those kinds of things. Oh, and here's a photo of Maple just half hanging out of his bucket. It's been a while since we saw a Maple photo. All right, there's also this concept of rolls of the dice. Now, at the Reboot Develop Red conference in Banff, a lot of talks mention this. Generating multiple rolls of the dice is a very important part of success, because we are fundamentally, I think we all understand this, so I'll just touch on it really quickly. We're in a creative field. We're generating stuff that relies on the whimsy and the whims of the public market. You may have the perfect title and it may flop. The only way to inoculate yourself into success is to roll the dice more than once. Roll the dice as many times as possible. That means look at your runway, look at how many games you have left to make with your budget or your life, and fit as many as you can in there. Lightning fast prototyping helps you do that. Now, not now. Now, I say with confidence at the wrong time. The only thing that breaks my heart more than anything else in the game dev industry are people that make a single game and then exit the industry. Roll the dice more often, please. And to help demonstrate that, I'm going to talk a bit about my career arc, my overnight success that took me from SexyPlane to Absurd Joy. I will mention real quick for the YouTube crowd that overnight success I ninja edited into the slide deck. It's kind of this funny concept. It was a running joke at Reboot Develop Red where many speakers had overnight success in their slides and then proceeded to talk about their 20-year-long careers. So that's an inside joke, and I just over-explained it for all of you. You're welcome. All right, so let's start with one of my first commercial games, SexyPlane, which you probably never heard of. Look at those beautiful... I was really enjoying South Park way back in my ute, and I made all the graphics look like cardboard cutouts, complete with shadows. It's kind of a tactical top-down airplane shooter. I spent a few weeks making this prototype, and I was working on it at PAX. I was sitting there at PAX at a hotel lobby with my laptop open. And someone walked up behind me, looked over my shoulder, and said, "Oh, hey, what's that you're working on?" And turns out we struck up a friendship. That was it ended up being Dan Cook. I had no idea who he was at the time. He's a famous game developer, and he asked if he could partner with me to turn this into a real game. And I said, "Sure, let's do it." So first thing we decided to do is let's make an MMO. You know, that typical game dev love story. You want to make an MMO as your first big game. But we wanted to be smart about it, and we wanted to keep embracing my kind of really fast prototype speed timelines. So what we ended up doing was laying out a plan on how we're going to get to that MMO through commercial releases to fund the development of the MMO. So let's break it down. What's the first thing we need to do to judge whether that MMO would be a success. We decided the most important elements of this game, of SexyPlane, would be the name. We need to change the name, so we changed the name. That's on the next slide. Second most important thing, the core gameplay, which is the combat, right? The planes shooting the other planes, that is going to be what makes the game live or die. It doesn't matter what we dress it up around, doesn't matter what our story is or anything else. If that core mechanic isn't fun, the rest of the game won't work. So, version 1, let's release to the public just the shooting mechanics in a single-player puzzle game on mobile, and let's see how the audience reacts. And we threw a ton of metrics in there, we recorded a lot of data, and we released SteamBirds. SteamBirds was my first really big success game for my studio, and it just proved out all the core mechanics. It was really good, and best of all, it paid for all of its development, and it paid for the development of the sequel. So, like, resounding success, right? Especially for your first big game. We figured out what worked and what didn't for the core combat mechanic, and we iterated on that, and we made it better. Second, you can't have an MMO with a linear puzzle mission layout. You need to kind of have endless, non-stop gameplay. Also, if you have an MMO, you need to have free-to-play kind of like coins, system, inventory, loot boxes, blah, 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 all that stuff. Having a virtual currency back at this time was rare and unheard of. We were one of the few games that were trying it out, and we decided to encapsulate that whole experiment in a whole new sequel, which ended up being called SteamBirds Survival. This was an endless game with a bunch of free-to-play mechanics, and it did even better than the original. So, hey, look at that. 2 experiments done. Now we're ready to start working on the MMO, the MMO proper. Let's keep building on it. Now, I would have more iterations here to talk about, but around this time, I actually decided to sell the IP for SteamBirds to Dan Cook. So I got a big cash infusion, which allowed me to start Radial Games as a big real studio, and also Dan Cook went off with the IP and founded Spry Fox Games. And over the last 10 years or so, I think right now on Steam Early Access, they have SteamBirds Alliance, the MMO. So they did it. So I wasn't there for the MMO version. None of that work is mine. But I'm so happy that we finally achieved the dream of making that MMO happen. So it took 10 years, but it worked. And that 10 years of biz, I did a whole bunch of things at Radial Games, including Iceburgers and Fantastic Contraption. I want to show the Iceburgers trailer really quick. Man, isn't that ridiculous? Iceburgers is a game. It's a simple word game that I got Kurt Gartner to make an amazing trailer for. This game only took 1 week. It was developed entirely at a cabin in the woods when we were doing an indie retreat out in Vermont. It was a hell of a blast of a time. I bring this one example of an actual shipped game up. From a core mechanic perspective, from a game design perspective, this is one of my favorite creations. It's kind of a unique take on like a word game that I've never seen done before nor since. I'm really proud of it. But also, there at the cabin for that week while I was making that game was Alex Schwartz, who many years after making this game would end up hiring me to work at Absurd Joy. So that was kind of the start of that relationship, was him sitting there watching me make this thing in lightning fast speeds. Now, it's a simple word game with simple art. I got help on some of the, the music and the art and some of the design and stuff like that. But yeah, It was an example of a really fastly made things. I also do this thing where every time I'm at a conference, I try to make a game. And sometimes I'll only spend 20 minutes on it. Sometimes I'll spend longer. But one year, I decided to go to GDC and sit in the lobby of a hotel and create what would end up being called Rockets, Rockets, Rockets. Now on Monday, I sat down and I spent a few hours kind of creating a little prototype. And later that evening, I showed it to a publisher. And that publisher said, yeah, it needs more work. Obviously. Then I worked on it for a few more hours over the remainder of the week. And on Thursday night, I had another dinner with the same publisher, who then immediately decided to take us on. So at GDC, with just a few hours of work, I was able to create Rockets, Rockets, Rockets. That gave us the promise of a good launch, gave us the ability to take some risks on the financing we had, and allowed us to, I believe it was 30 full-time days, 30 days of full-time work for our team to get Rockets, Rockets, Rockets up on early access. And then we worked on it, let's say for another 2 people years, roughly. So we worked on it for 6 to 12 months with varying numbers of people on the project doing various things. It was a lot of fun to make, and it got us into a lot of shows, got me able to meet a whole bunch of people, and it was a lot of fun. So I love doing that, making myself a little memento at every conference. And sometimes it turns into something commercial, sometimes it doesn't. Kind of running off the success of Rockets, 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 kind of led into us having the budget and the ability to create Fantastic Contraption for VR. We've given a lot of talks on Fantastic Contraption, so I'm not going to go too deep into it, but the part I want to bring up is our zero code to first Gold Master was around 3 months of development. Thankfully, the launch of the VR hardware was delayed by a few months and bought us some more time to continue working on it. But we were one of the launch titles on the HTC Vive at the birth of commercial virtual reality, and we crammed a whole bunch of amazing features into it, like Gord there and the green screen. A lot of that tech was made by the seat of our pants in under a year with a team of roughly six or 8 people, depending on how you count it. So rapid development can lead to serious commercial success. Fantastic Contraption was a serious commercial success. And that work in VR and that excitement of developing for a virtual reality platform resulted directly in me working at Absurd Joy now today. So that's my career arc. That's my overnight success. That day one with SexyPlane was almost 11 years ago now. So what a ride it's been, right? All right, almost done. I'm just going to touch on personal growth a little bit. You can use this rapid prototyping or lightning fast prototyping framework to improve your personal life as well. There's a lot of things you can do quickly outside of game development. And I'm going to use one more example from my personal life. I was a terrible public speaker. I would say and like way more than I did in this talk so far. I had no appreciation for dramatic silences. I didn't know about timing or anything. I didn't know how to roll with an hour-long production like this video, and I wanted to improve that in me. Now, I could take a Toastmasters class or something like that, but I decided to roll this into my development practice of lightning fast prototyping and ended up making a daily podcast. For 18 months, I had a podcast that is not worth listening to. Please do not try looking it up. You will be massively disappointed and I will be embarrassed. Please don't try to listen to it. But I had 3 rules. It had to be 5 minutes long. I had to do no editing, and I had to do it all in one take. Now, that kind of no editing implies one take, but what I mean is, if I do a podcast that is at least 5 minutes long, that means it's going to take exactly 5 minutes of my day. I'm not going to do a 5-minute or 10-minute or 15-minute long podcast and then edit it for 3 or 4 hours and then my day's done, right? That's called a job. I'm not taking on podcasting as a job. I'm trying to improve my skill. And if I can edit out all my mistakes, I'm not going to improve myself in my public speaking. So I learned through, the first few podcasts I did for those 18 months, the first few I was publishing, they were rough. And I had to do 40 or 50 takes to get that 5 minutes out. There's delays. I missed some episodes, right? But at the end, I could hit out a 5-minute podcast while I was walking to go buy milk or something, right? Like it's not difficult to do once you get the practice in, and I used the podcast as an exercise to practice. I made sure it didn't suck up my day by limiting it to around 5 minutes, and the no editing forced me to get it right in one take. That's how I'm talking this hour-long thing while making, it's not just not making a mistake, it's learning how to roll with the mistake. I've made a few mistakes in this video, but I rolled with them. That's part of the thing. Okay, one last personal growth thing. A long time ago, I gave a version of this talk around about when I was working on SexyPlane, discussing the success of SteamBirds. And that's way back when I started codifying all this lightning fast development stuff. I was giving that talk at Full Indie in Vancouver, a little local monthly game dev meetup. And while I was there, there's someone in the back row of the talk heckling me, and I went on to marry that person. So if you do lightning development, you'll find a spouse. That is how I'm finishing this talk. Boom. Prototyping at lightning speed. Yeah. I'm happy to help anyone out with information, knowledge, just chit-chatting even. Please hit me up. I'm Andy at absurdjoy.com. Now, the elephant in the room is if I make a prototype at every conference, then what did I make for Banff Reboot Develop Red? Well, at Reboot Develop Red, I met some new friends and I was inspired to make a game, and I will show you what that looks like here. This is Myst. It's a puzzle adventure game where you're on an island in the ocean and there's a mystery to be solved, and the island is very misty. It is. Look at this. It's hard to see my day-night cycle going on. It's the mystery is, where's that music's coming from? And you walk around. Oh, that's where the music's coming from. And happy Halloween, everyone. Hey, you can run and jump around. Woo. Okay, that's it. Now the key is, I gave this presentation originally on a brand new laptop that I brought with me to the convention center. I had no code in it. The morning of this talk, I built that whole prototype, and I limited myself to 20 minutes. I didn't have any of my old libraries. I didn't use any code reuse. The only thing I did is I grabbed the assets off the asset store because I can't make skeletons at all. Never mind that fast. So I got some assets off the asset store, but I made a little parody of the game Myst, showed it to my friends from Cyan Worlds that were there at the conference with me. Boom, that's it. All right, let's do a Q&A with the audience that doesn't exist. Email me. Let's talk more. Okay, bye.